It involved the installation of secret observation posts, isolated from the outside, in the strategic points of the enemy's rear guard. Those observation posts would be equipped with all the necessary supplies so that a selected staff was able to survive 1 year and send the required information. As regards the Mediterranean, the proposed enclaves to study the location of these modern Trojan horses were, not surprisingly, Malta, the harbour of Aden at the exit of the Red Sea, and the Rock of Gibraltar. In the autumn of 1941, the Gibraltar garrison was marching against the clock to turn the colony into a fortress worthy of such name. Months before, the civilians had been evacuated from Gibraltar, and not only the Gibraltar garrison, but also the artillery crew were constantly getting reinforcements through the arrival of new units. The greatest effort was focused on the excavation of tunnels and underground premises for the garrison to use as shelter, the strengthening of the artillery positioning, and the fortification of the old airfield's exterior, as well as the extension of its runway. Gibraltar was rapidly getting ready to resist an assault. In the planning of the excavation work, priority was given to the complexes that were located southward and northward within the rock. New galleries were opened, and annexed to them several warehouses, shelters, hospitals, command posts and quarters for the troops. These chambers would finally be joined by the well-known tunnels Fosse Way and Great North Road, which provided a solid tactic unity to the imposing network of tunnels and galleries that would be, along with the airport, one of the great legacies that World War II left to the colony. As a matter of fact, in March 1941, 2 new Royal Engineer companies, identified with the numbers 178 and 170, joined the sappers from 180 Company and the well-known section of the No. 1 Company Royal Canadian Engineers, who had been working in Gibraltar for almost a year. The arrival of these new companies had led to a significant increase in the digging rate, so much so that, thanks to the combined effort of these units, the building works at Fordham's Flats, Liddell Union, McFarlane Gallery and Gort's Hospital were finished, and many others were started in the eastern and southern areas of the rock. Among them was Lord Airy's Tunnel. As a result of this huge effort, as the year 1941 wore on, the idea of turning Gibraltar into a fortress began to leave the sphere of propaganda and become a reality. However, the British realized that the garrison's resistance ability in the event of an enemy assault was still limited, and in a matter of weeks, or maybe days, the colony would end up in the hands of the Wehrmacht assault powers. The British had always bargained for the possibility of losing Gibraltar. That is evidenced by the fact that, in parallel with the defensive tactics, they decided to take some measures in case Gibraltar was finally occupied by the German powers, despite every effort. One of those measures was the preparation of a big hollow in the east side of the rock, so that in the event of an emergency, the governor of Gibraltar could escape from the fortress in a submarine. However, the most heroic initiative was without question all the activities related to Operation Tracer. It's already been pointed out that for Great Britain, as it had been for Germany or Italy before, it was vital to be informed about the shipping activity across the strait. But if Spain went to war in support of the Axis powers, and the Germans succeeded in capturing Gibraltar, the British naval intelligence would find it extremely difficult to keep stable observation posts on both sides of the strait. It's also been mentioned that the whole Mediterranean naval traffic moved around 3 basic spots: Gibraltar, Alexandria and Malta. But in the autumn of 1941, the British knew that although they had reconquered Cyrenaica, Rommel was still very far from Alexandria, and they counted on Churchill's willingness to continue sending reinforcements to the north of Africa. On the other hand, there was no reason to anticipate the imminent fall of Malta. However, there existed some belief that once the Russian campaign was over, Gibraltar could turn into Hitler's next target. Capturing Gibraltar not only ensured the control over the French colonies in the north of Africa, but also allowed to send Rommel all the troops he needed to reach the Suez Canal. Taking all this into account, some members of the British Naval Intelligence met at the personal residence of their director, Rear Admiral John Henry Godfrey, at 36 Curzon Street, Mayfair, London, and agreed that, of the 3 basic spots mentioned before, the place where the first tracer team had to be sent was the British colony of Gibraltar. Before long, SO-1 Gibraltar Commander Geoffrey Burley received instructions from London to find a suitable place to locate an observation post where the first tracer group of the British Naval Intelligence had to be established. In this regard, because of its height and geological disposition, the morphology of the rock presented clear possibilities. It did not have to be very hard to find a suitable place to locate an underground complex capable of housing a team of 6 men, their equipment and supplies for a year. The complex had to be placed in the upper half of the rock, where the height above sea level would offer them the required perspective. And what was even more important, the north-south disposition of the rock and the gradually sharpened borders of its higher areas could let only one team, with all the necessary building, climb a hill on the east side to take in all the Mediterranean area, and at the same time another hill on the west side to keep under observation the area of the strait, the bay, and the ports of Gibraltar and Algeciras. Burley knew that they only had to be a little bit alert to find the place. Clearly, if someone could help him find what he was looking for, that was the chief engineer, Colonel H.M. Fordham, someone who knew the interior of the rock very well, as he was the chief engineer responsible for every excavation done in Gibraltar since 1940. Fordham answered to Burley's call, accompanied by Lieutenant Colonel A.R. Hay, his predecessor in the position, and another tunnel rat, who was now second in command. For several days, Burley, Fordham and Hay inspected numerous parts and sections of the current excavations. Finally, they chose a location at 411.48 metres above sea level, near the so-called Lord Airy's Battery. The complex near this battery, known as Lord Airy's Tunnel, was a recent expansion of some old facilities from 1890 that now included several warehouses and chambers. One of these chambers, originally built as a shelter, was the place that these specialists believed had the suitable characteristics to establish the first tracer team.
I believe this location was picked because tunnelling was going on in this area, so that could be used to hide what was actually going on and what the excavation was for. Given that they wanted to cover the bay, they wanted to be able to see across the bay and watch shipping en masse either in the bay or see shipping through the straits, then this was one of the ideal locations. Of course, you then have the problem with the Levanter cloud, and this is something that put me off looking in this area many years ago, because my belief was any observation post of this kind would have needed to be below the line of the Levant cloud at its worst.
Once the location had been chosen, Burley designed a complex with a structure based on one main element, a chamber 13.71 metres long, 4.87 metres wide and 2.44 metres high, with walls painted white in order to avoid a feeling of claustrophobia, and the floor covered with cork layers that served as noise and thermal insulation. It was a space of 163 cubic metres, 57,600 cubic feet, where a team of originally 5 persons had to live for a whole year. This chamber would serve as lodging, dining hall, and warehouse for provisions. There was also a huge cistern of around 37,800 litres, 10,000 gallons, and next to it, on the floor, there was a fountain with a drainage channel. In this chamber there were 2 doors. One led to a kind of access tunnel that stretched down to the main tunnel of the battery that, when the right time came, had to be properly sealed and perfectly hidden so that it was not found. The other door led to some sort of shelf. On the shelf's right there was a chamber that hosted the radio, and on its left there was another chamber used as a toilet. Further on there was a flight of stairs that led to the upper levels. At the end of the stairs there was the eastern observation post. In the middle of them there was another flight of stairs that led to the western observation post. In addition to allowing the observers and their optical apparatus to watch almost all the sensitive naval sectors of the area, these small openings of 30.4 by 15.2 centimetres allowed the proper ventilation of the complex. Needless to say, it was almost impossible to see it from the outside, which proves the fact that it remained unnoticed during more than half a century. In addition to mentioning all the details of the location, and giving a thorough description of the complex, the report that Burley sent to the Naval Intelligence Division included the technical details of its building and camouflage, suggestions on the lodging, warehousing and sanitation needs, and different recommendations on the electronic devices and their use, among others. This document was incorporated into the dossier that the British Naval Intelligence was gathering in order to improve even the smallest details of the operation. The Chief of the Naval Intelligence soon gathered a group of experts that included medical doctors, explorers, staff with thorough knowledge of expeditions to extreme habitats, and specialists in communication, among others. The Naval Intelligence sent Colonel Cordo to Gibraltar in autumn of 1941 because of all the issues that arose and the need to study in situ the conditions in which the transmissions had to take place. While gathering the information requested by London and making the expected verifications, Cordo was able to check the progress achieved in the excavations and the retrofit of the complex. On the 27th of December 1941, Cordo signed his report to Admiral Godfrey. As Cordo already knew, the work plan developed by Fordham gave the highest priority to the area where the transmission equipment had to be placed. This fact was determined by the need to start the transmission tests as soon as possible, and deciding not only on the characteristics and uses of the radios, but also on the conditions under which the communication between the military, hidden inside this particular Gibraltarian Trojan horse, and London had to take place. It had to be taken into account that every building work in Gibraltar had to be finished by mid-February 1942. Once Cordo had finished his work, Godfrey would also send Captain Sandwith, DDSDY, to Gibraltar with the mission of studying and testing all the technical aspects of the transmission and, with Burley's help, specifying the way in which those transmissions had to be organised. In order to choose the appropriate equipment, Sandwith had the help of Colonel Richard Gambier Parry, one of the best experts in long-distance communications and transmissions from the Secret Intelligence Service. On the 11th of January 1942, only 2 weeks after getting the Cordo report, London received the Sandwith report on the equipment. According to this report, the transmissions could be trusted to a standard transmitter Mark III and to an HRO receiver, which were easy to find in the Gibraltar military warehouses of that time. Its installation was possible because it only needed a space 1.22 metres long, 0.61 metres high and 0.45 metres wide. It would operate with 3 small 12-volt, 120-amp batteries rechargeable with 2 generators activated by physical strength, 1 manual and another one connected to a bicycle that was powered by pedalling. With regard to the transmissions themselves, after several trials, the suitable frequency for the transmission was found to be around 12 megacycles in the daytime and 7 megacycles at night. The only concern was that the communication could only be established after